working on page 72. This is going to be your 7th grade vocabulary for chapter 8. We're going to be starting into chapter 8. Chapter 8 is 10 lessons long, quite lengthy. So hang on tight. We're going to be doing a lot of formulas. We're going to be doing a lot of recognitions of shapes and growing on things that you should have already learned. So the first definition we're going to look at is angles. And so you're going to fill in the blank with angle. An angle is formed when two straight lines or rays meet. So if I draw a line, and it doesn't matter how you draw it, and I draw another line, that's two lines. Now in geometry, lines have arrows because they go on forever and ever and ever without any ending. So that's why we call them lines. Not like a line that doesn't have arrows on the end. It's different in just plain old line. Sometimes when you draw those are line segments. Rays is a point that extends along a path, like it's looking like a line, but it has a definite endpoint. And like we call sun rays, rays that are coming from the sun or emitted from the sun, those are coming from that central part of that sun and then shooting off in all directions. But that's a good example in real life of the geometry term of rays is the sun. But straight lines and rays, they meet at a point. That common point is actually called an end point because it's at the end of that ray or that line that we start. The common point of the two lines, that's this point right here. We call that one the vertex. And so whenever you hear the word vertex or vertices, then we're referring to that point right there. So angles are formed by lines. So here we have an angle. And we're going to talk about that type of angle. Here we have an angle. And then we have angles opening on both of these sides. So that when I have two lines, I'm going to have 4 angles around it. This is just one angle from here to here, or that opening from there to there upward. That's a single angle. Later in life, you'll actually talk about the angle formed by the outside of those two rays meeting, but we're going to focus in this grade on the angle opening and how far this is rotated. And that's what we call an angle. So it's formed when two straight lines or rays meet at a common end point, and that end point right there is called the vertex of an angle. Okay. So we just talked about vertex. So that's our next word right here, vertex. And vertex is the point where two rays or line segments, what do? They meet there. So when they meet at that vertex. Also, polygons is where the edges meet on a polygon. So we'll get to that in 3-dimensional shapes. But those edges meet at vertices. So if you have a polygon, so let's say you have a triangle, because that's a polygon. Polygon meaning many sides. And that's what a polygon is a many-sided object. Poly, the word poly means many, gon means sided. This triangle right here, and it doesn't matter how I draw it, has vertices. Vertices is plural, and so each of these points, point A, point B, point C, are called vertices. And that's plural. Vertices, we have A, B, and C. And those are points. So a vertex is a point. So in geometry world, a point is just that thing when you say, okay, I have a point right there, and I move them, or I locate them, or I find them on a graph. Those are points. All right. An angle whose measure is, and this one's going to be a right angle. A right angle. A right angle is an angle whose measure is 90 degrees. And the degree symbol is the little circle up top. And it's formed by perpendicular lines. And so when I have perpendicular lines, that means that if I do it like this, then I form 2 perpendicular lines. Or I could have done line segments. So I could have just done it as line segments. Or I could do them as rays, like I did at the other version. And the rays join. When they make a right angle, you will see this symbol right here. And that symbol gives it away. In this object, you'll actually see 4 right angles. So you can actually have more than one right angle. This opening only has 1, this one has 4. When they put this symbol, it automatically denotes that it is 90 degrees. They don't have to tell you it's 90 degrees. You have to know it is. So when you see that symbol, that little box, that means 90 degrees, and you want to look for that. Okay, our next term is acute angle. And we say, oh, it's such a cute little angle. Little acute angles are angles whose measure is more than what? It's more than 0 degrees, like this, but less than 90. Now, it can't be exactly 90. If it's exactly 90 degrees, then it's a right angle. Now, I did use the word degrees here, so I've already got the symbol that does mean degrees there. An angle whose measure is more than 0 degrees, but less than 90. So if I have a ray going this way, and usually we see it the other way, if I have it going this way, I want to make that opening less than a right angle. Then that would be referred to as an acute little angle. I could have my angles going up and down this way, as long as that opening remains less than 90 degrees. It has to still be more than 0 degrees, so it can be an itty bitty little angle, but it can't be 90 degrees like this one. So I can go from 1 degree, so I can go from 1 degree all the way up to 89 degrees, and then that's what I refer to anything in that as an acute angle. Okay, obtuse angle. Obtuse angles are angles whose measure is more than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. So it can't quite be a straight opening. Like we do with a door, we don't swing it all the way. We get it obtuse, but we don't go quite all the way to the wall. So if I have an opening like this, my vertices there, this opening from here to here is what we call obtuse. And again, it doesn't matter which way your rays are going. It's still going to be obtuse as long as it's greater than 90 degrees. So it's just slightly bigger than 90 degrees. It doesn't matter. It's going to be obtuse. Obtuse. We say obtuse and acute. Obtuse is big. Acute is little. Straight angle. A straight angle, there's actually such a thing as a straight angle, and it measures exactly 180 degrees. And it will look like a straight line. So it's very deceiving. So when I draw this picture, I actually have to put 3 points on it so that you can see it's an angle and it shows rotation. Otherwise, it just looks like a line. And it might just look like a line, but it could be referred to as a straight angle. It's 2 rays. They meet at a common endpoint called the vertex, and it makes a 180-degree opening. Then we have in math what we call congruent angles. And if you know the word congruent, the symbol looks like this. It's a little squiggle tilde with an equal sign. And congruent angles are angles that have the exact same measure. That means they're exactly the same. They're open the same amount. So if I draw an angle over here, and I say, okay, this angle right here is 80 degrees. And then I go over here and I draw the angle going this way, and I tell you that the opening here is 80 degrees, then those angles are congruent, and I call them congruent. Now if I were to label it, I could label this, and I'm just going to label this DEF, and I'm going to label this angle over here JKL. Then I would say angle DEF is congruent to angle, and I went DEF, the E is the vertice, should always be in the middle, and JKL. The reason the K has to be in the middle is because it's the vertex as well. So when you name triangles or angles, you have to go in a particular order. And on angles, you have to go with the vertex in the middle. If it's a triangle, we can just call this ABC or CAB or CBA. But if I talk about the angle, angle CBA would just be this angle. Angle BAC would just be this angle. Angle ACB would be this angle, and you name it by the vertices or the vertex. Congruent angle. And I should say congruent angles. It needs to be pluralized because it takes more than one angle to be congruent. The same measure. Vertical angles. So when you sit vertical somebody, it means you sit opposite them. We have vertical angles that sit opposite each other. And either of a pair of angles that have the same measure of their vertex, but they're going to share that same vertex. They're going to share the same vertex and are opposite sides of two intersecting straight lines. So if I draw a line and I intersect that line, you will form what we call vertical angles. It's a pair of angles that have the same vertex. So here's the vertex. This angle right here, and I'll label it. And I'll label it A, let's do B here and C. And then over here we'll have D and E. So I've got some little angles measured here. And I would say they're vertical. So angle ABC is this angle right here, ABC. It's that opening there. I'll mark it. Is vertical to angle, and that means opposite. It's directly vertical. So if you see the V and you flip it over, it's V over here. That's vertical to DBE. Now the confusion comes in, it's DBE or it's EBD, but that B has to be in the middle on both because again, that's the vertex. So angle ABC is vertical to angle DBE, they're opposite. There's another set of vertical angles and I'm going to mark those as well. So this angle is actually vertical to this angle over here. So I can say angle ABD is vertical to angle CBE. And again, I have the B's in the center because that's the vertex, but those are vertical. Now what's really cool about them, because they're vertical, they are also the exact same angle measure, which means they are congruent. So we just use that word up here, they're congruent. So this angle measures the same as this angle. Now, because this is a straight line, this would be a 180-degree rotation all the way across here. So if I tell you that this angle right here, let's make it 40 degrees on this opening, that means this angle is 40 degrees because they're congruent. So they're both going to equal 40 degrees. They're congruent. So vertical and congruent as well. Vertical and congruent as well. But this set of angles here is not going to be 40 degrees. This is acute. This is obtuse. It makes a straight line, which means it measures 180 degrees. So I take my 180 degrees and I subtract 40 degrees from it, and that'll give me a 140 degree opening or rotation for that angle. That means this angle opposite is also 140 degrees. So both of these equal 140 degrees. So 360 degrees would be the full rotation around all four of these angles combined together. All right, our next term is adjacent angles. When you sit adjacent to someone, that means you're sitting right next to them. Adjacent angles. So these two angles here in this example are adjacent. These two angles are adjacent, these two angles are adjacent, and these two are because they share a common ray. So two angles are adjacent when they have a common what? A common vertex. Well, they also have to have the vertex in common, and a common side. We also call that side a ray. And you have to be careful they don't overlap, which means they can't overlap each other. They have to be touching. So I'm going to use this drawing right here. We're going to use that drawing right there so you don't have to redraw it. And we're going to say angle ABC, that's this one, is adjacent to. It is adjacent to. So angle ABC is adjacent to, and it means it's touching and sharing a ray and a vertex with this angle here. So the 40 and the 140 are adjacent to each other. They're not congruent. They're not the same measure. They're adjacent. That's the vocabulary word. So angle CBE. Now you can say that angle CBE, I'll just use that one again, CBE is adjacent not only to ABC, but to the angle to the left of it. So that would be angle EBD. Now we can keep doing this all the way around. You have this angle adjacent to that one, that angle adjacent to that one, that angle adjacent to that one, that angle adjacent to that one. They have to be physically touching and they can't overlap one another. So be careful. It is right to give a compliment. There's the word right there, right angle. I got ahead of myself. So we're going to make a right angle here. This proves to you just people in life make mistakes. I have to make a right angle, so I need two angles whose sum make 90 degrees. It is right to give a compliment. Okay, so if this angle right here is a 20-degree angle, then that means what would it take to add up to 90? It would take 70 degrees. And that 70 degrees plus 20 degrees will add up to my 90 degrees. It is right to give a compliment. Sorry about that. I got taken away with my coughing. Supplementary angles, those are two more angles whose sum add up to 180 degrees. And to supply more than one complement is even better. Sorry about that, but supplementary angles is when you have two angles, let's go back to it, that add up to 180 degrees. And that was what we call supplementary. So if this angle here, we'll go back to this, was 150. I just made that up earlier. I'll still use it. And this one's 30 degrees. Then those are supplementary angles. Now the angles don't have to be adjacent or touching. You can have an angle floating over here. And let's say this angle over here is 45 degrees. And then I have another angle floating over here. And I tell you it's 45 degrees. Then the sum of these two angles equals 90 degrees, then I would say that they are complementary. It is right, that's this word right here, to give a complement. So that's 90 degrees. To supply more than one complement would be 90 plus 90, which would be 180 degrees. And that's a full rotation. Another way to kind of remember it with the words is if you write the word complementary, and you look at the word complementary and you take the C and you put a line down, it'll look like 90 right there. It's kind of cool. And if you do the supplementary angles and you put the slash this way through the S, it looks like an 8. So that gives you that 180 degrees. So the the C that you bring down will give you the 90 degree look. And the S, when you make a slash through it, will give you the 8 and 180. My apologies for messing those up. We're just going too fast. This is complementary angles. It is right to give a complement, and supplementary angles have to add up to 180. And just a quick example with this too. Let's say you have this obtuse angle that's hanging out here, and you say it's 160 degrees, and then over here you put an itty-bitty little angle that measures 20 degrees. Then I know that this 160 plus the 20 will equal 180 degrees. So these two angles would be supplementary. These two angles would be supplementary. So the angles don't have to be touching. They can be in other locations as long as together their sums are 180 or 90. And you'll be doing more of this later. So this just in a nutshell is a lot of the vocabulary that you need to know that helps you to be successful. And we'll be continuing to use this later on. All right, take care.